Hey gang, welcome back to Inverted Pursuits Laboratory. This week we're going to actually be taking a look at Screwball. So we've discussed this rocket before when I did my build guide and went through the full assembly of the rocket from its base kit all the way up. But since then I've had some user feedback and I've also learned a lot from flying it in the field, and there's some other things that I feel need to be added to on the instructions, and some just like little areas that people don't quite understand what the purpose is and how it's supposed to be used. So I wanted to go over that in as much detail as I possibly could. So we're going to start off with some like simple things. So as far as recommended parachute, I really recommend you fly on a 48-inch chute. I know a 48-inch chute does not fit inside the body tube with a Jolly Logic chute release. It will fit with a 36-inch, but you do risk the chance of having a body tube crack when you come down under a 36-inch, especially if you're flying in a desert area or anywhere with not had a lot of rain recently or no fields. If you're flying in like Kansas like I do, you can come down under a 36, but if you hit a road, you're potentially going to be coming down and breaking at one of the joints. It's an unfortunate side effect of the 3D printing is that some of those joints tend to be weak. On the upside, because this whole rocket is 3D printed out of PETG, it is very, very easy to repair. All you need is a bottle of CA glue with you in the field and you can repair it. Something you can see even on this rocket here, there's a line all the way around this body tube section where I broke it in half and repaired it. And I got the same thing on this one. And this rocket has flown in this exact configuration. I flew it on an H550 trying to break Mach. Didn't really succeed. Still kind of want to try that. Looking at flying it on a J270. But with these defects and re-gluing them, I have flown them. The type of failures you'll often see are like what I have here. It doesn't look like a failure, but there's supposed to be positive threads here because I've got female threads on the back. So if I pull its other half out, you'll notice that this section cracked off. Now this is one of my prototypes, and I'd flown it about 4 or 5 times before I had this failure, but basically it came down at an angle. This side hit first and it tore it off. I did not actually choose to try and fix this one with CA glue because I wanted to have it as an example and a test piece, but you can just run CA glue around the perimeter here and fuse that back together, hold it for like a good 5 to 6 count, and it'll be solid again. This one's also missing a couple other pieces. It broke pretty severely on its final flight. I had a really rough flight where I was doing some experimental stuff. That's when these rockets tend to break the most, but they are really good for a cert flight, especially if you're flying on an H219 or an H100. They work really well for cert flights. But please just remember, a bottle of CA glue with this rocket is your best friend. If anything breaks at all, you can just glue it back together and fly within the time it takes for the glue to dry. I'll often even bring the Quickset spray with me to kick it instantly so that I can get back to the pad in under 10 minutes. Because my goal is just to be flying as much as possible when I'm out at the range. All right, on to the next thing. So when we are working with our rail buttons, so I've had this question before. The rear rail button screws into the bottom. It has a pre-drilled hole, and some people have made the comment that they have to back the rail button out in order to get out the central motor tube, which this one's actually jammed in there because, again, the joys of flying the prototype. I've got some bugs in my setup. All right, this is the proto of the proto. Oh, yep. Oh, you're not going to release today, are you? The joys also is the fact that you can unscrew this thing, as it makes it really easy to get it apart. If you're ever having trouble, you can just unscrew it. I have had the question asked before, what if like you're not a fan of the way the rocket's flying or something? Please remember that if you're not a fan of the way something's flying, everything is easily fixable. You can glue these threads together, just as long as you remember you're not going to be able to take it apart. But this motor tube, which has my J270 adapter on it, because J270s are a lot longer than H550s, the motor adapter slides in the back, and they were noting that when you screw in the rail button all the way down, or to its proper spot, that when you go to pull it out, oh, mine comes out. Most of them, they will not come out. It will actually jam it in place. Let's see if I can get it to do it. Yeah, there it goes. It doesn't want to come out. It sticks. That is not a bug, as a lot of people have thought. It's actually a feature. I wanted to have it that in case your rear retention on the motor failed, that it was less likely that this thing was gonna come loose. So I didn't want to like have you guys be risking losing your rocket just because this came out, or you losing different parts just because things started to fail. It was actually an extra feature in there designed to help you recover your rocket more easily, or increase the likelihood of recovering your rocket. The next most common question I have gotten related to the rail buttons is drilling the upper rail button. So the kit does not come with the upper rail button drilled. Largely that was because sometimes rail button location is very dependent on how you're flying it. Like when I'm flying a J270, it's going to be in a very different location than when I was flying the H219, 550, and 100, which all ended up with the rail button pretty much being within a 1/4 inch of where I had it placed. And I've had some people like show different ways that they're doing it, but my personal favorite way is, so you know you're going to need to put your rail button somewhere up here, and I take a piece of string, which I don't think I actually have string down here at the moment. Man, I'm gonna look silly. Oh, I do. So I use kite string typically. This kite string is pretty easy to get a hold of. I will just tie a simple knot around one end of my string so I can slide it. So the knot slides and shrinks. I then wrap that around my rail button. Ooh, that did not work. I will wrap it around my rail button to tie it in place. Let me just tie that on real quick. See if I can get this to stay now. All right, so then I take that string and I will run it all the way to the tip of my nose cone, which I actually don't have a tip on this rocket, but we're gonna go with it. That's the tip of my nose cone, and then I will use a piece of tape to hold on this upper section. Now I've got a line running perfectly between my lower and upper rail button point to tell me exactly what my straight line point is. And then I will go, okay, I wanted it 20 inches from the top sleeve, or I knew I wanted it like 8 inches from the bottom, and I'll go and I'll measure and I'll mark that location along the line to where I need to drill my hole. I usually just use a Sharpie to mark it real quick. Fine point, even fatter point's okay to use. Related to that, I've had a lot of people ask how to drill the hole to get your rail button to seat perfectly. This is actually one of my prototype pieces where I've drilled different holes. I will drill either an 1/8 inch or a 7/64 hole. An 1/8 inch hole, I just take it straight from my drill, and I will actually go ahead and show this. Let me double check. I believe that's the 7/64. It is. So I will take my drill, put an 1/8 inch bit in it, and since this is my prototype piece, we're just going to drill straight into it. And I do 1 in, 1 out. I don't mess around with the hole, trying to make sure it's perfectly smooth. My screw will take care of that. Now we're going to take our rail button, you put it on the hole, try to keep it as square as you possibly can, and then just gently thread it in. With an 1/8 inch hole, it should just thread in super smoothly. Now what you'll notice is that you're going to probably have a little bit of raised material inside the body tube. You can just take a file to that and knock it down. It's really not that hard. I can even knock it down with my screwdriver real quick. Just reach in there and rub on it. Just rubbing will knock that off. Now if you're wanting to drill a 7/64 because you're feeling like your 1/8 inch just is a little too risky on being oversized, you got your 7/64. So we'll drill our hole. Again, just a quick in and out. I don't even step up most of the time because these bits are so small. I'll take my rail button and I will go straight onto it. Now this is not going to go in as easily as the 1/8 inch hole because it's smaller. You will have to apply considerable force and pressure into the side as you turn to screw this in. It will either catch very quickly or it may take a little bit of work. Sometimes you have to heat the screw up a little bit to get it to take, but then it pretty much immediately takes straight into the body tube and you get it your desired point. Again, you'll have a raised burr inside and your screwdriver just reaching in there can knock that burr off on the inside so it doesn't catch on your parachutes. If you still think there's a part that's like raised more than you like, get a file in there. You can pick up some nice crescent moon files from Harbor Freight for very cheap. And that's how I recommend doing that. But as far as like rail button install, that is how I do it, and it's how I recommend it gets done. The next question I've had is heavily related to the nose cone and mounting things within it. So as my workstation becomes more of a mess. So the nose cone, when you get it, will have 3 pieces. I don't have my tip. The one I had, I broke when it came in really, really hot. But this sled, my sled's a little bit different than yours. Yours will be a little bit taller. I modified this one specially for use with MissileWorks T3, which I don't even have a functional one of anymore. I've been just kind of jerry rigging an egg finder mini tracker into this. And I also will put a Marco Polo. So there's a couple ways you can mount things in here. You'll have a flat face up here, and you also have a well in the back. The well in the back is usually where I like to put batteries for my trackers. And then I'll just run zip ties through to lock them in place. But I wanted to quickly show you how I go about locking an item in place. All right, so I've got angle cutters. This is my Marco Polo tracker, and I've got 2 zip ties. That's all I really need. These are some of the cheapest zip ties you can get. They're 4-inch, 18-pound zip ties. They are super small, but they will hold up perfectly for what we're doing here. They're made by KT? Yeah, KT Industries. This is also how I hold my batteries in place. So on the back well here, you'll take your tracker and just slide it down inside after you've turned it on. And then I take my zip tie, and there are 4 holes on the back. 4 very nice to use holes on the back when they behave. Okay, I don't like that. I use the outside most 2 usually. Of course, today it's not wanting to play nice with me. And my goal is to get it set across the unit so the unit can't come back out. Now what I've done is basically locked it in there. I will then take another zip tie and just come right over the edge and basically lock that zip tie in place. Then I take my angle cutters, flush trim, almost flush trim, don't cut your antenna, and then I will actually come and cut the head off the original zip tie I used to put in. I won't cut it all the way off, I will just nubbin it down, and then when you go to thread it in, you'll notice it gently sticks, but then threads in to your nose cone very nicely. Another way I will often fly trackers, especially the Marco Polo, since the Marco Polo unit is so incredibly compact, is that I will just toss a chunk of dog barf in the nose cone space. So I will have my nose cone fully assembled, and before I put the tip on, I'll shove dog barf down in there, drop the tracker in, shove more dog barf, and then screw the nose cone on. And then I've got my tracker floating around inside a dog barf sandwich, and I've seen them recover just fine with that method. Last thing on the list for common questions I've seen is some people didn't understand how to attach this eye bolt. So the eye bolt actually attaches via a screw that goes in a slot here on the front. I'll try and make that as obvious as I can. So within the threads, there's a little cutout. That cutout is for a screw to go in it. Occasionally, you will find that in post-processing, we forgot to remove the support material from within this hole. You will just simply need to get a pair of tweezers or a small screwdriver in that hole and just wiggle it around and break it out. It will take some doing. I really recommend small flathead screwdrivers like this. They allow you to get in there really well, and then you can just kind of peel around in there to get the support material out. It's unfortunate that that happens sometimes, but our quality control isn't always perfect. I really try to catch that stuff before it goes out because I like to get it out of your way and make the process of assembling this rocket as little hassle as it possibly can be, but occasionally you will find that in there. Then you will need to go ahead and put your nut, which will be a 1/4 nut, will slide in this slot. If memory serves, it does, yeah, it does hold in place. So I can screw this out real quick. And then my nut might come out. Yep, there's my nut. So the 1/4 nut will go in, and it will not always want to seat. So then again, a small flathead screwdriver, you can reach up in there. When you can see in the bottom, you'll be able to see where the nut is sitting, and you can reach up in there and kind of gently persuade it into place. There's a little more of a gap in here than I like right now, but then you take your eye bolt, and I always put an opposing nut on the eye bolt and thread it in, and then I caught on my top nut, and I just keep threading it in place. Occasionally you'll run into the fact that it'll spin in there. I just take my screwdriver and I'll just wedge it in there and then tighten it in place more. You also have the option on your nose cone that if this thread gets stuck in here, say something got really, really hot, it's not the greatest thing to try, but you've got a hex here on the bottom that you can put a wrench on and try and grab onto. I usually recommend you get a pair of pliers around the outside to twist it off. It's a lot more reliable than using the center hex. Let's see. So we covered pretty much everything that I have had big questions on. Now, I do sell spare parts for all of my rockets. So on my web store, you will find a description or a posting that will have parts, and it will be SB, or there's like Screwball BS1, Screwball BS2, Screwball Fin Can. They're not all on there. It's just the common ones that I think people will want. I've never actually seen a Fin Can fail, unless I did something really dumb with it, like tried to break it. The body section ones will occasionally break if you're not super careful with them. Particularly, your most likely failure is going to be messing up that rail button hole. But if you really don't feel like buying a new one, because I'm not a fan of spending tons and tons and tons of money on things, you can fix mistakes on your rocket yourself. So if you drilled a hole right where you wanted it and it just didn't work, or you flew your rocket and you tore the rail button out and now there is like a giant divot in the side of your rocket and a chunk's missing, what you can do is take some tape, like what I've got here on the nose cone, blue tape, place it on the inside body tube covering that hole, and then get CA glue and baking soda and fill it into a paste basically, and fill back in that hole to basically make a patch. And then you can drill back through that paste after it's set. Basically it'll make a solid epoxy chunk that you can drill back into, and then you'll probably need to get a tap and tap that. I don't really know how well that will tap, but I highly recommend you, or just thread in with the screw, but I highly recommend you go ahead and get a tap if you're going to fill a hole in your body tube with epoxy and baking soda. Baking soda? Yeah, it's baking soda. Epoxy and baking soda, and it'll make a paste, and you can actually basically do Bondo type fill work with it on defects on your rocket. I'm all about trying to do as much of this yourself. There's pretty much, in my opinion, no need, unless you have like an extreme failure or you can't find a piece, to have to buy and replace a piece. These rockets are extremely agile and malleable in their ability to be fixed. So if you break anything, you always have the ability to fix it and refly it. And that's just the glory of the Screwball platform, is that it can always be fixed and reflown. If you're deciding you don't want to be able to take the rocket apart, because I designed the rocket to always be able to come back apart and not be permanently glued back together, predominantly for storage and for configuration changes. It also makes occasionally getting the motor mount out a little bit easier if you don't screw your fin can on, or glue your fin can to your first body section one. And I really recommend that if you're going to start gluing joints, don't glue this one. It's already stable on the inside because the motor mount tube actually passes up to about here. So the motor mount tube basically rigidifies this entire joint, and if you break this joint, you had a really, really hard impact where your chute probably didn't deploy. That's the only time I've seen it break, and it still broke the BS1. It did not break the fin can. So if that's an area you're thinking about gluing, I just wouldn't. But you can take each of these sections and glue them together. My strong recommendation is to place it about here, and then place glue around the upper threads here, and then twist it together as quickly as you can and tighten. Your goal is to get it together before the glue sets. If you have it completely apart and you put the glue in there and start threading it in, the heat from threading two pieces of PETG together will kick off the glue before you get it together. PETG, just threading it into itself, always generates heat. And you can do that with all the joints up. If you notice, this rocket actually has one extra section in it that I have black in here, and that's to account for the fact that I was prototyping flying on a J270 with a bigger extension for the motor assembly. But this rocket just is one of my favorite designs, and it's just one of my favorite things about all my rockets is in the PETG CA glue fixes everything. I feel like I've said it 1,000 times, but CA glue fixes everything on these rockets. I have made several of our taps out at my launch site, and the LCOs and RSOs give me the craziest looks when they watch me break the rocket, walk back in with pieces everywhere, glue it back together, and walk back out to the pad. And they're just like, wait, isn't that the rocket you just crashed? And I'm like, yep, you can see all the glue joints here that I just put it back together. And they're like, is it strong? And I just go, yeah, it's strong. The glue joint is just as strong as if it had printed solid. And that's the craziest thing, is that I put all these parts through tests. I don't want to ship anything that's bad, and that's just kind of a sanity thing for myself. Is like, if I can take a part and grab it with both hands and try and tear it apart and it does not come apart, it's a good piece. I have had parts where there was like a questionable joint, which is actually what happened with these two body sections. Is that when they came off the printer, I saw a line here that I wasn't happy with. And the first thing I did was I grabbed it and I just didn't even put any force, just went crack, and it popped right apart. And I went, well, those are mine now for experimenting. And I went and tried gluing them together. I don't remember which one I actually did first. And I wasn't thrilled with the results, but I was like, all right, well, it worked. That's kind of cool. And it's strong. It looks like it's actually the bottom one here that I did first. And then I needed to actually do another one out in the field, and so I actually did this other one out in the field, and it turned out way better just for me sitting in a lawn chair doing this, like intensely holding, going dry, 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 dry. But like, I glued these back together with CA glue after they were failed prints, and they worked perfectly. But I will always check every piece before I ship it to you. Like, even the fin can I'm flying right now is actually a defect print. It's got a line right across here where it skipped an outer perimeter. All the way around, it skipped the outer perimeter like 19 hours into this print. It skipped an outer perimeter. And while it is perfectly strong, I did not want to ship this to anyone and have them go, I've got a print with a line in it, what the heck? Because it's a defect, and like, I'm not going to ever ship you a print, or like ship you print defects. But I wanted to show that like, it is perfectly strong, and especially because you've got the motor mount tube running through there, it helps reinforce it and it's less likely to fail. But this is the Screwball rocket. These are my updates on things I have learned and things I have learned from you guys flying these in the field. I really appreciate those of you that have bought this rocket and field tested it. We have learned so much together, and I'm just so happy with how this journey has gone as I've gone through the process of designing and building this rocket over the last 2 years. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I really would love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on my updates to the assembly process for the Screwball rocket. If there are any other things that you would like to see, again, comment section below. I would love to hear them. If you're interested in buying one of these for yourself, it's the first link in the description below. You can go take a look at our web store. We've got all sorts of things, from 3D printed rockets that are for the experienced user to 3D printed rockets that are for the beginner. And honestly, I wouldn't even call this an experienced user required rocket. This rocket could be flown by a beginner, someone who's never touched a rocket before in their entire life. All of my instructions for how to build this, again, are on my website. Just go to the downloads page and you will find all of the instructions for building all of my various rockets. I also carry things such as camera mounts for the different cameras that are used, the Mobius Maxi, the Run Cam. I've also got a mount for the Astro Cam. I carry charge wells, screw switch covers, and a variety of different little things I have started trying to print on rockets just to see what I can make as I dump things off my desk. But again, thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.